So that is the noisy bass sound I'll be showing you how to make in this tutorial video. And throughout this course, we'll be using the Serum synthesizer to create all these patches, but you really could use any advanced synthesizer like Massive, Massive X, or Anna 2. Just make sure that it has extensive modulation capabilities and also some effects that are built in as well. The only other VST that will also kind of be a key player here is going to be the Isotope Trash 2 plugin. It's a multiband distortion plugin that we'll use quite often on a lot of these different sounds. So you'll want to have that or another multiband distortion plugin if you're going to follow along with the rest of the videos. So in each of the different videos, I'll play all the patches in context of a quick little song example, like what I just did, showing you what they all sound like whenever they're played together, and then I'll show you how to make the individual patch and sort of the mixing steps that I would take for that patch to make sure that it's radio ready. So let's go ahead and start off with this noise bass. Just copy it down over to a new track, and we can open up an initialized copy of the Serum synthesizer. And the way that we create this sound is by taking a sine wave, a noise layer, and then compressing and distorting everything together to get that interesting sort of blown speaker effect on the bass. So let's go ahead and load up a waveform. We'll do the analog BD sine, which just sounds like this. A pretty standard sine wave. Now we can turn the level control all the way up. Make sure to swap this over to mono because we have a bass. We'll grab that for the second wavetable as well. And then for this one, we want two voices. And bring down that detune so that everything's a little bit less pitch shifted. And then we can turn down the level control. Keep it to about 32. And then we are also going to frequency modulate this from the noise layer. So we'll do FM from noise oscillator. We don't have anything there yet, but we'll add it in soon. And that sounds like this. We get a little stereo width out of oscillator B. We put that level maybe 41. And then the FM amount is going to be at 75. And then we can create the noise layer. So we'll turn that on, go to analog, and we'll do the ARP circuit noise layer, which just sounds like this. Almost sounds like a bit crushed white noise. It's a bit crunchier than usual. Turn the randomness all the way up, so each note plays at a different spot in this noise waveform. So if we were to play multiple notes, there's no phasing that occurs. Bring the pitch up to an amount of 80. We can also bring the level control all the way down because we'll just be using this as a frequency modulation element. And that sounds like this. Then we can move over to the filter, and I'm actually going to filter all the bass out from the second oscillator. So swap this over to oscillator B, take that cutoff down to just about 250 or so. Bring the resonance all the way down, bring that drive up just slightly to an amount of 15. Leave the fatness and mix where they're at by default. And we want to swap this over to a high pass filter. So we'll do high pass number 12. That sounds like this. Then we can go over to our envelope and make this a little bit more like a kick drum that has a bit more of like an attack transient. So we'll put the decay at 639. Then we'll put the sustain at negative 4.6. And that sounds like this. So the start of the sound is a little bit louder than the rest of the sound. Then that's actually all that we'll do for the Serum instance. Now we're going to go ahead and apply some effects. So go over to the effects devices, and we'll look for the Trash 2 plugin. But you could really use any multi-band distortion unit here. The Trash 2 is just excellent for very aggressive sounding basses, so I find if I'm making more experimental sounds, this plugin is really excellent. So I don't need the multiband for this specific sound. We're just going to be doing two different stages of distortion. So we'll start off in the drive. We'll go to drive, and then I want to use this tube driver because tube distortions tend to work best for this type of sound. And then we'll actually bring the drive all the way down so we get a bit more subtle of an effect, and it sounds like this. So it's just a bit more subtle. It's a bit buzzy sounding. And then we'll go to the second stage of distortion, and we'll add in another distortion. So we'll go to drive, and I want this one right here, this crunchy grunch, I believe is how you say it. And then we're going to go ahead and put the drive at an amount of 3.1. Leave everything else where it's at by default, and that sounds like this. So by stacking these different distortions, we get a very intense distorted effect but we also keep a lot of the cleanness of our overall signal, which is what we're going for this type of bass sound. So it's still nice and distorted, but we still have that nice low end. Then let's add in some equalization just to tighten the sound up a bit. I'm going to go ahead and use the Pro Q2 from FabFilter. You could use any of your favorite equalizers. I just find this one's quite friendly to use, so that's why I tend to use it on a lot of my sounds. But the one at Ableton also sounds great. So we'll make a mid cut here, and I want this to be at 198, and then that's going to be at -3 decibels. I also want to change the filter steepness to 24 decibels, so we get kind of a steeper filter notch here. And then I'm going to put the Q at 1.3, just so it's a little bit narrower. And that sounds like this. It's kind of cutting out all those gross boxy frequencies. Helps make our sound a bit more balanced. Now let's add in a high pass cut. And I want this to be at 14,000 hertz. That's just cutting out all of these frequencies, which we don't need because this is a bass element, but we still want things nice and noisy sounding. And then before and after the equalization, it sounds like this. So with this equalizer, we're cutting out some of those upper high frequencies, and we're also addressing some of the rumbliness and those low mids that sound a bit resonant and unpleasant, and we're just fixing that with some equalization. Then the last thing that I want to add in is going to be under the audio effects. I just want to add in the utility plugin. We'll be using this to create a fake sidechain-like effect, because this will enable us to get a really tight sounding sidechain effect rather easily. You could always use VSTs like LFO tool if you'd like, but I find that the utility plugin inside of Ableton works really great for this, and then you don't have to get any other plugins. So let me just copy over the automation from this first track here. And I'll paste that over to this new MIDI clip. And if we take a look at this, you could just see that these are 16th notes. So these fades are 1/16th note long. And they're just happening every single time we have one of our kick drums. If I was to play where the kicks are. And occasionally they're happening whenever we add a snare as well. So altogether, that final patch sounds like this. And then over here, we just have a single note stab. So basically, we have this pattern here that has a sort of variation. We also have this variation as well. But let's take a look at the actual main note pattern, because everything is just based off of this one. So it starts off on a G note in the octave of 0. And then at the very end here, kind of halfway through this second bar, it jumps up to these higher notes. So it has this G in the 3rd octave, G in the 4th octave, so it jumps up quite a bit. And then we also have these lower notes down here, which kind of re-trigger the envelopes and give it this sort of glitchy effect. They're also not starting perfectly on the downbeat, which again plays up that sort of glitchy feel. So everything in context sounds like this. Let me go ahead and just adjust the overall volume here. So it's a pretty cool bass line. The way that you want to use this in your tracks is almost like a foundational element. So this is playing throughout the majority of these sections with a little bit of variation in it, and then you use all these other different bass stabs sort of wrapped around that element to give you some variation. But the main bass is going to be this sort of noise bass. So that's all for this tutorial video. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next video. We'll be making some more bass sounds.